Welcome to The Growth Agenda, a sales and marketing podcast presented by Kvadrant Consulting. In this podcast, we explore how commercial leaders can provide new answers to the old question, where will growth come from? We hope you enjoy today's episode.
Hi, Toke.
Hi, Carsten.
Glad you could come here today.
I'm feeling the honor.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. We've been talking a lot about interesting stuff during the years.
Yes, for so many years.
Yeah. And now it's time to talk a little bit also about growth and the growth agenda, which is very close to our heart here at Kvadrant. But first and foremost, you're here because I know you've been doing exciting stuff during your career.
Yeah.
So I thought actually the segue into our conversation would be for you maybe to talk a little bit to the listeners about who are Toke and what has brought you here that you are today, and then we will dig a little bit deeper into what you've been doing in various positions, etc. So,
yes.
Who's Toke Lund?
Oh, that's a big question. Actually, I'm not sure I know it myself, but at least from the overall perspective of my career, I started out studying economics at Aarhus University. We had an anniversary this year. That was 20 years ago. And then after end education, I started with what is now today Bain & Company. I started the old days when it was called CRO, Copenhagen Consulting Company. We actually had some small interfaces back then, but afterwards you can probably hear on my accent, but I'm from Jutland, so I was sent to Jutland, and suddenly I became head of strategy in the Lego Group under Jørgen Knudstorp, the CEO.
Yeah.
In the happy, good old Lego days where we did a business case and then 3 months later we did it again, but multiplied by pi almost. And then after 4 good years there, I became global leader inside the Lego Group. I had an EMBA from a school in Switzerland called IMD. And I got a little son, and everything melted down in my head, and I needed to cut away on the traveling days. Yeah. So I took a very harsh decision and moved to Dan Supermarket, nowadays Selling Group, and started out in business consulting, doing a lot of leaflets, promotional leaflets. So I know quite a bit about growth and driving trade. Yeah. Unfortunately, I still look at the leaflets every Saturday. And after that, I became head of the digital challenges towards customers, meaning Bilka DK, Føtex DK, Booster.com, all the innovative stuff towards the customers. And we were doing a lot of e-commerce. We actually had 3 of the 10 largest e-commerce sites back in 2015. And the crown jewel of that was a SAP Hybris solution. That was before SAP realized that Hybris was something you commit according to Greek mythology, and the Nemesis company kicks your ass. And I spent 4 years feeling the pain of Nemesis. Yeah. But after that, I went to a system integrator called Novicel, doing strategy, doing international expansion. And then in the midst of Corona, we were sitting and feeling bored. And as my mom always said when I was bored in my childhood, I did stupid stuff. Yeah. And I started a startup selling software. And that's where we are today. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Enterspeed, where we do sell a middle layer that can accelerate digital transformation and digital growth within large enterprise companies.
Cool, exciting stuff. I think we'll get back to each of the components later. And I was actually thinking yesterday, what could be the headline of our conversation today, Toke? And I know from our conversations, it's something like, having worked in business with an ingredient of digital, and then working as, I think, especially you as well, as agent of change in many different circumstances. So I thought that to go a little bit deeper, we could go into each of the sort of the chapters of your career. Yes. And then extrapolate a little, what have you actually learned, etc., for sort of what can be of relevance to the listeners today. So
let's try that. I'm up for it.
So starting as a consultant back in the days, young gun, I would imagine at that point. Motivation and what sort of what did that do to you?
Actually, a lot of young people coming out of university, if they are lucky enough, they can and good enough, they can become management consultants. Yeah. And I did it because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. But I wanted to learn a lot, and that's the good part about consultancy. The learning curve is extremely steep. You learn a lot of different businesses, you learn a lot of different challenges, you learn a lot of different organizations. So I saw it as a good way of learning stuff. And what you do learn is much about, actually a lot of companies have the same problems. Yeah. They might call it differently, but it's the exact same problem you see from time to time. Yeah. And if you're really good in understanding how you solve that problem, you can actually scale yourself pretty fast. So I ended up back in 2009 doing 5 of the same processes, but with a little bit of lag between every month. And it was 5 different PE companies where we actually started doing the strategy, and then, it's the same strategy, but with different names and different content. Yeah. But then afterwards, how do we then fit the organization to that strategy? Yeah. And then we did the organizational change afterwards. So strategy, change. Yeah. But it was the same process. It was the same elements, and it was actually the same challenges they wanted to work with. Yeah. It's about growth. It's about making that innovation towards that growth. But it's also about making the organization ready to actually be there. And from a young consultant, you can learn quite a bit about really seeing the same problems and how you can articulate them in different ways. But it's the same structure and method that you solve the problems with.
So one thing is, as you say, this component of seeing the same pattern again and again, and see how much you can improve your game in terms of actually solving these challenges. But what about then this element of being a relatively young guy and then knowing what to do with other clever people to unlock the growth? And then what was your experience when you worked company side? Did you the barriers, did you really unlock them? What were the hurdles when you did there? Is there some interesting, because working as a consultant, that's our first and foremost sort of a thing to do, is really help solve problems. Yeah. But we do it together with someone, even though we are hired as a consultant. We experience that here as well in everything we do.
Yeah, I would actually say I was pretty lucky. First and foremost, because back in the days, CRO was quite known of having a lot of senior partners that has been to some of the big consultancy companies, BCG, McKinsey, and back on. So we were very much catapulted almost into the C-level and right into the CEO office. So I was sitting in those 5 projects that I was talking about, despite that it was in Jutland, but I was sitting one-to-one with the CEO. I had a line to the chairman as well. So they were aligned that they needed to do something. And that's a totally different mandate compared to, I'm a consultant, I'm with the middle management, and we needed to do a strategy project. Yeah. Those are most often ending up in a drawer. But if you're really sitting on the CEO agenda and you're really sitting with the board chairman, that's where you can create the impact. Yeah. And you need to find ways to get there. That's unfortunately. And you can see it in calendars all over. And I can come back with examples from my later career. If it's not on the CEO agenda, it's probably not going to be a very successful project. I know there's a lot of really successful projects. But if you really want the change to happen, it has to be on the CEO agenda.
And did you then see it float all the way through the organization? What was what was the conversion of it? Of course, you saw parts of projects, etc. Yes. Again, leaning a little back to what we promised the listeners here to say, the impact it leaves, how did that look at that point of time?
At that point in time, it was also during the crisis of 2008, the financial crisis and so on. So some of the elements was not only growth, it was also we need to cut down on stuff. But actually the most successful strategies that we did and where we got the most impact was reducing complexity. And I'm coming back to that from time to time again in my career, is that if you want to be really successful and resonate with people, both in your communication and in everything else, if you start by communicating, we are reducing complexity, and we wanted to do it in this and this and this way. Yeah. It's much more simple, because what we are used to, both in the digital world, but also in other pieces of life, we're just adding complexity. Yeah. We in our daily life, we are adding more and more appointments and things we should do and consider and so on.
Exactly.
The moment you start free up things, that's the moment you start get flow. And it's equally with strategy, it's equally with organizational change. Yeah. The moment you actually cut out complexity is the moment that people start to buy into stuff. Because, of course we should do less in order to do more.
Exactly.
And they understand that. But strategies where you just add on, people will just sit and say, I'm fed up with my agenda already, I cannot do more.
Exactly.
So that was actually one of the key learnings of my consultancy days. It was not to look at adding more, but actually to look how I could remove stuff.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you are hired to help a company solve a problem that a company hasn't been able to solve themselves.
Yes.
Even though there are equally as clever people sitting on the other end, etc. But you're here to help solve something that the organization hasn't been able to by themselves for various good reasons.
Yes.
Either because they needed a second point of view, or because they weren't able to sort of get people around a table to do it, or because they didn't see the logical traits of how things end up as they do. So a common thread there.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier to see the complexity from the outside than from the inside because, we have this legacy because X, Y, Z, and I know all that. But sometimes asking those questions, saying, why?
Yeah.
And then say, why again? And say, are you really sure that that's important?
How much was sort of a digital, either facilitated or empowered solution a part of the projects that you did at that point? Was that still a little early days, creeping in there, but not sort of as core as it is today? Or what would you say it was at that point?
So, and unfortunately, I can say it's 15, 17 years ago, right? So I'm sounding like an old man, I know. Yeah. But in reality, what was the digital part was that we started to have data. So we all called it data-driven decision-making and so on. That was the headline back in the days. It was not digital business. It was just like, we need to take better decisions based on data. And now we have data. And that was what we talked about. So what I did, I was called Mr. Excel in some companies where I could go in and play with it. I actually call it I play with Excel because it was just like playing a game back then. But actually just doing the analysis, understanding which segments are you actually earning your money on, and understanding some of those things and could do that kind of analysis was data-driven decisions back then.
And was your experience that the companies hadn't done that themselves, or was it sort of what was actually the issue? Because you were looking at the outside, not knowing the consultancy world, you would say clever people in a company, very skilled at what they do, and then you come as a consultant and say, okay, we segment this, etc. What was sort of what was lacking as you saw it often?
Two things, and it's very basic. First of all, they had scattered data, so somebody should sit down, spending a lot of hours actually putting all this data together to something that could be analyzed. So I spent a lot of time saying, you have this data over here, you have this data over here. The data quality was poor. So could I get to a data quality level that was good enough?
Yeah.
Then the flip of that coin is actually that nobody had time to do it back then.
Oh.
They were all so busy doing their daily work, and that's still part of the case, right?
Still the issue at times, I would say.
Exactly. But you as a consultant is a free resources that is actually, you need to do this in order to deliver the analysis. So, and you have time. So that's what's going on. Sometimes it's just a matter of time because there are bright people inside those organizations and they could do it themselves, and actually they should do it themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But their agenda, their daily life is filled up with all other tasks that feels important.
Yeah.
But from the outside, at some point, the CEO says, I need this now.
Yeah.
And everybody says, but I cannot throw away this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Okay, then we buy consultants.
Yeah.
And it's the same today.
Yeah.
But it is something, at least back then, it was more focused on, we need the analysis on what to do here. So please go in and do that.
Okay, 4 years in, Toke leaving the consultancy world.
Yes.
I know that what you left for was a Lego brand known to almost everyone wanting to work for Lego, but also a Lego company in a bit of a peculiar situation at the point of time where you entered.
We grew on a daily basis. I kid you not, we did a business case on building a factory in Monterrey, and 9 months later, we tripled that case. Because we needed way more capacity than we believed. So I changed to Lego because I had the opportunity to work with one of maybe the best top leader in Denmark for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And I could do that on a daily basis, and I love learning something new. So I said yes the day he called it, even though the salary was poor and so on. Yeah. I really liked it. I loved it a lot. That was my best job ever. But it was 3 tough years because everything that was on his agenda was also on mine. And one of the things that you learn in Lego is that a lot of things is happening despite that you don't want it. So actually understanding what's going on at a large organization like Lego is a big job.
Yeah.
And he needed to understand, he needed to know what's going on, what's the idea about what we're doing under the extended line or with the new products and so on. So there was a need to have somebody to digest that. And I was that someone. That was extremely exciting.
And everyone, or at least in the Danish context, a lot of people know the story of Lego. in terms of the turnaround, etc.? Where are we in timing, just for the
we
listeners?
We are back in 2010, and in 2010 we were way beyond the turnaround. But we were into a phase where our biggest problem was growing, but without putting a lot more complexity into stuff. Because when you start to grow, you start to hire new bright people, new bright people, they have great ideas, but great ideas turns into complexity and other things. So a matter of actually thinking, how can we continue to make the execution and setup as simple as possible to actually make sure that we can continue with the company that we wanted at that time and continue to grow.
And that's actually a very interesting sort of a connection to what we talked to previously, where you said as a consultant, then coming from the outside, you help with reducing complexity. But what were your tools then to reduce complexity, being an insider, even though you sat in a strategy function, still insider, part of the problem yourself?
Yes.
I remember you telling some of the stories of the mechanisms that were installed to make, what can you say, a scalable and profitable growth, and something that your CEO at that point, I know, was sort of deliberate thinking about how to do.
If you look at it from the outside, and that's a key learning that I've taken with me for the rest of my career, and will continue to do that, is that if you look at the turnaround of the Lego Group, one of the key elements that they did at that point in time was, I think it was in 2003, they have 12,000 different components, meaning different bricks. And they slashed it down to half. They had 500 and something different SKUs. They sliced it into half. Why? Because of the complexity of having 12,000 different bricks and 500 different SKUs. But if you slim it down and you keep a lid on that, and that was actually one of the key things that was continuously discussed. How many new elements can we put into the portfolio? And they continued as top leaders to say, no more than this. Then the innovation on, if you want a new series like we did Ninjago the first year I was there, the SKUs, the components, they needed to be very similar to what you know in City and all the other stuff. So no new bricks, but you needed to do the innovation from there. And by putting in a few limitations, you could actually keep the complexity down. But you need to understand what is your complexity drivers. Inside the Lego Group, the complexity drivers was new components. Because the more components, the more molds you needed in the production, the more change you needed in the production, the more complexity you actually added to the setup. It's like a pizzeria, right? It has the same what you call a pizza in the bottom, but then you add a tomato sauce on top. It's still the same. And then you maybe put variety on the top in terms of toppings. But if you start to change a lot on the toppings, you might need to change some of the base. And then you screw up with your complexity. You create a different monster. And that's what a lot of people and a lot of companies need to know, is that how am I actually putting complexity in? And should I put that complexity in? Or is it only toppings? And that's what I've been looking for quite some time. Is actually, how can we reduce complexity by putting in some very strict restrictions on your business? And it works.
And there are different layers in the organization, because I remember you telling that this was something that was very deliberately talked about in the C-level room.
There
were decisions sort of being removed because of too much complexity. But how was it then sort of installed throughout the organization? Because as you say, the energy of many people with a lot of ideas, which is a great energy for a company. But then sort of balancing that to make sure that you guys didn't kill that energy either.
I can give a very, very concrete example. Everybody back then knew that US was a growth market. We needed to grow US. And US, they were allowed to make a series, they were allowed to make large investment in marketing and so on. But France, they were not allowed. France was a core, profitable market, meaning they needed to deliver profit so US could grow. Of course, that gave some challenges in terms of, okay, dear France, you're not allowed to invest in that campaign. But everybody knew. And we were recruiting the guys that was going to France saying, you are here to generate profit, nothing else. And those that were in US, you're here to grow. Two different mindsets, but everybody knew. So when we were meeting up at large leadership, Lego leadership teams, everybody knew. My role is to grow. My role is to create profit. And if you have that kind of clarity, you could also say, okay, don't go out of your boundaries. You know exactly what to do, and everybody knew. Back then, everybody knew.
You knew which boundaries within to be a success instead of just sort of that's always if you leave too much room for interpretation.
Yeah,
it sounds so strict, but it's actually sort of the best way we behave, all of us in life, that we know where to play and how to do it.
And the interesting part, everybody wants to grow, and France was sitting every year and say, I want to grow more. Just like, no. Deliver.
That's not your role.
That's not your role.
Yeah.
Deliver what you promise, which was part of the saying inside Lego, is that deliver what you promise, and you promised, and you are recruited for that role. Deliver on that.
Then when we get back to growth, learnings on growth here. Simplicity, going again from the consultancy world to Lego. Then a little bit about how to communicate it, being very clear about what is what. Other learnings from that, you've probably been involved in a ton of different projects following the CEO's agenda. What did you come out with then there? Because now you were the internal consultant in some way. Somewhat similar, but also a very different role, right?
I have two very, very key learnings. The first one is actually a quote from Charles Darwin, and everybody says, well, why is that a learning from the Lego group? But the quote is, it's not the strongest of the species, not the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. Yeah. Those are the ones that will survive. And continuously focusing on how your responsiveness is a key element. Both in the digital world, where I'm working right now, saying, are you stuck on a large legacy digital setup? Then your competitor would outcompete you within a few years. Yeah. If you have that kind of responsiveness, then maybe AI will set off and you can do new processes and so on, but you can actually adapt to those really fast. You're not stuck on legacy. So that kind of thinking, saying, how are you responsive as an organization, as your infrastructure, is truly crucial. And we talked actually quite a lot about responsiveness. Yeah. And in my early days in Lego Group, I was like, okay, what do you mean about responsiveness? Yeah. And I was sitting but suddenly it really hit me when we talked about the IT infrastructure and so on. It's just like, that's where you get your adaptability.
So responsiveness throughout the organization.
Exactly.
And detecting that in various areas and I guess also calling it out and being very honest in the situations where it was not at all in place.
It's in IT structures, it's in processes, it's in your strategy, it's in your way of working that actually figure out, are you truly responsive to change? Yeah. Those companies that are truly responsive to change, they will survive the next 10 years because it's going to be crazy markets and so on. Yeah. But they will survive and they will continue to grow because they will find the new growth pockets. But if you're stuck on some of this legacy elements in processes and so on, you will not be able to adapt to those new growth pockets.
So actually a very sort of a valid point coming out of that is really, really sort of a hot topic, I would say, right now in most of the organization. We'll come back to the interactions that you have today, but we really see that again and again, this responsiveness and being honest to yourself about whether it's actually in place or whether it's something that you sort of convince yourself about that you actually have as an organization, but you don't.
Exactly.
Okay, 3 years, accelerated growth learning. I would imagine you said that hectic as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. Then I became a leader of a global organization, and I was rewarded with an EMBA from IMD, which was fantastic. Game-changing, I would say, for me, and also personal development was enormous. But I also mentioned I got a son at that point as well, so too many traveling days. Also, one of the things that you really learn about in an MBA is that you learn a lot about yourself. Yeah. Who do you want to be?
Exactly.
Both as a leader, but as a person, and so on. And I was sitting together with a CEO of a large Dutch company in Silicon Valley. And then I showed a picture of my son, and he started to cry. Yeah. And then he said, "Don't be a dad at an airport." No. And I took that very deliberately. And that was why I changed jobs.
I almost get emotional when you say that, because I have some of the same sort of experience when calling that out in that point of your career. You need to really get a grip of what you are doing and try to fit something to the place you are in your life at that point.
Exactly.
And as you say, these MBAs or leadership programs, they might be, and they are a lot about cool cases, professors that are some of the best, most clever people you ever meet. Yeah. But the other component that I think someone sometimes forgets is that there's a lot of a tendency to be a psychological sort of a session that you have, and a point in time where it's probably also a very good thing for you as a person to do that sanity check.
It's an eye-opener to many things. Yep. Both that if you are working in a company for 20 years and you get your eyes open and say, wow, they're doing business completely different in China or in India or whatever, or in a software company. That was eye-opening as well. Yeah. But it's much an eye-opening saying, am I stuck? Yeah. Am I putting my bets on my career in the right basket? Am I in the right place? Who do I want to be? Where do I want to be? Big questions. But when you're sitting and listening to all those cases, it just comes to you. Yeah. And a lot of colleagues from that class of 2013, they have all changed jobs. Yeah. Which is because we were all eye-open to something else.
And you had the new job at Lego at that point, or you just got it and then it was a part of a...
Yeah, part of my transition into a new job.
Yes. Yeah, okay. How long did that sort of... what did that lead to in terms of... Did you carry on in that role for... a long time, or did it lead to you to instantly thinking now it's probably time for me to...
It led to half a year to a year where I was just saying I'm struggling, because when you get an EMBA, you feel like you are shot out of a cannon. Yeah. And everybody's standing still in the organization, and you are just, I'm a different person. Yeah. Almost, and probably I wasn't. No. But I was more certain about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And that's a big change. And if everybody else has not changed, then you find you struggle actually fitting in, back in. And that's something I know a lot of graduates from IMD classes is struggling with. How do I fit into that role I had before? Now I'm a completely different person.
Yeah, exactly. If you take that one part aside, then there is also a subject matter thing coming to IMD. Learning about the fundamentals of business. Of course, you've learned that at a university or whatever education one have had prior to joining a big corporate, etc. What did you get out of that? Standing with the classes of professors that were somewhat like the professors at least I met some of them in various places, and they are a little bit of a different breed to at least what the professors that I met at school.
Yeah, at university, these are completely different. Yeah. They have character, they have knowledge, and they are talking to the top CEOs of the world. Yeah. So they're seeing something that we are not seeing ourselves. Yeah. And they are trying to teach us that. So actually the perspective I came back with is that there is this kind of ladder saying, you know that you don't know. Yeah. And I was enlightened to the level saying, I know that I don't know. Yeah. Not I believe I know. I was past that, but I was on a different level saying, there's so many things that we don't know. Yeah. So don't talk about that. Figure out where I want you to be. I loved it. I can recommend it for everybody, but you also need to be aware of the consequences, because there is something that is changing inside you after a course of that.
And I actually remember maybe not so much of the personal change, because we didn't know each other at that point, but I remember you still pulling things from that time up here and there. Yeah. I'd say, I think it's a year ago where we discussed a lot about growth and e-commerce and digital in general, and then suddenly you arrive at my office and then you say, we forget the classical Ansoff matrix at times. And then we fleshed it out, and actually we have an article about that, etc. But actually, very specific, hands-on. You probably also had it in business school at that time, etc. But having a completely different perspective of this growth matrix, how do you actually put that in play? Yeah. How did that pan out when we talked about assortment in Lego, etc.? Yeah. Suddenly you are able to add a layer to what seems like a theoretical framework, but can then be applied to solving things in the real world. Yeah, that's what I've very specific example of.
But that's how I see it, and also if I look at the way I work myself, is that I tend to go back and analyze stuff, but analyze it. with the perspective of, okay, this and this professor, how would he actually go beyond this? And trying to structure it in a way that he will do it and say, okay, that's what we should do.
Yeah.
So and I still use it on my small startup business on a daily basis.
So a lot of both subject matter expertise, mentors in reality, and taking that with you further in your career, and then a lot of personal change and reflection for what you should then be doing, and coming back as a different person to the organization. Then you shifted again?
Yes, I shifted to Salling Group, the largest retailer in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
First doing 1.5 years doing heavy analytics on promotions. So what is driving trade? So I can basically take a leaflet from Bilka or Føtex or whatever, and I can see whether they are going great or they are doing poor and what they're doing. But actually that thing about the key process in a large company like Salling Group, the promotions is the core process. Yeah. From the Lego Group, there were 7 core processes. Yeah. And that was mapped out and everybody knew when and how and what. Yep. In Salling Group, every Wednesday when you discuss prices on the leaflet in 2 weeks' time, that's where the magic happens.
That was the core process.
That was the core process. And I learned quite a bit in being there. And then suddenly I had some opinions about how you do digitally. Yeah. Also based on my background from the Lego Group. And then I started to work with those large e-commerce sites, understanding, okay, what should we as Salling Group do towards our customers? Yeah.
And this is, even though you had a lot of digital experience from back in the other roles, etc., this is where it really moves center stage, right?
Yeah.
In your responsibility.
Suddenly I was heading up a department of 60 developers and business consultants and so on in order to drive that. And they were all pointing to the same point, saying we need to fix our e-commerce platform. Yeah. So I needed to use some of the consultancy skills to actually dig deep into understanding those kind of tech. Yeah. But if you look at tech from the outside and you want to learn a little bit more, it's all about data flows. Yeah. It's how is data floating through from all the way from your backend systems towards what the customer sees. Yeah. And how is it then utilized and transformed during? Yeah. But it's a process. Yeah. And if you understand processes, you can actually go deep into digital. Of course, I have learned other stuff in terms of how the digital different components is working and so on. But basically, the data flows and the process of the data is crucial to actually understand your responsiveness in your digital stack. And I was working with that for 4 years with a large team of developers, architects, and so on.
And then one thing is, I mean, I can imagine I've been in some of the situations myself in terms of tech legacy, etc., but also a business known for being extremely good business, having a great deal of business acumen in Salling Group, etc., brands being very strong, etc. Growth, of course, Salling Group has international growth, etc., but also growth in a sort of a local context, in a very set market, etc. Yep. How was it? How were you able to sort of affect that? Let's do something new, or let's accelerate what we are doing. What did you succeed with there?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Or succeeded, or at least tried to.
So a couple of things. Yeah. If we start look at the digital way, one of the things that I'm truly proud of is I didn't build it myself, but at least I was supporting those who build Bilka to go. Yeah. For instance, shopping food online. Yeah. We saw from many different models around the world that it was actually not profitable, but we could go at least close to zero in the profit on each basket if it was picked in store. Yeah. And we launched that concept together with we bought a small startup, and then we started to grow through that. Yeah. And today it's a big business of Bilka. But it was one of those early days, but you needed to understand, okay, we needed the product data. Yeah. The best product data in Salling Group was at that point tulrullpøl. That was the data on a tulip rullepølse. Yeah. Tulrullpøl, nobody know. But back then, when you were a retailer, if you could just see the product on the shelf, and you could see something that was similar to what you saw and the price, then you are happy. But you're not that digital, right? No. So we needed to actually up the data quality. We needed to up all the pictures and so on. There was a lot of quality data management that we needed to do. Yeah. And that's process, right? And sometimes it's also just being highly operational. Yep. So that was one thing that we could actually do and work with in order to create that scalability that we wanted inside Bilka2Go. So that was one thing in terms of working with scalability, working with a structure that I learned from the two other places.
Yeah. And I guess also what you're saying here is the notion of yes, doing Bilka2Go, for example, or doing a new business venture like that. Yes, it looks great on the sort of marketing surface, digital interference, etc.
Yeah.
But probably I would guess 90% of your work was done under the hood.
It was completely under the hood.
Because the other thing is actually more or less sort of relatively easy to fix.
It's basically a transaction. It's a basket. You have been doing basket for years inside Selling Group, but not a digital basket.
No.
And the expectations coming through that digital basket was completely different.
Yeah.
But you needed all the processes to actually cater for those, and it took forever to get there.
Yeah.
And that was part of the problem. The other part of the problem was that we were back in 2015 to 18. We were having these large e-commerce sites, and they were competing in a market where the heat was turning up on a daily basis. New business opportunities arose, but it was still within Denmark.
Yeah.
And we needed to actually both get new products in,
but
also getting new features in that was important to clients, so a loyalty scheme and other stuff.
Yeah.
But when you start to just scratch the surface on is this product in store, then you need to look at the data. Do we really have that data? Is that data correct? And there are so many things that you need to work systematically through in order to actually be able to deliver a feature saying, is this product in store?
Yeah.
Which is a small thing. And even the performance management. So one of our biggest enemies was not the customers wanted to buy stuff on online. It was actually the store manager in a large Bilka, because he was not rewarded for that sale.
No.
And maybe it was a sale that was coming there, so there was a lot of performance management, change management that was also included in actually what should we do in order to drive that that trade.
Yeah.
Even the leaflet. So if there was a front page on a leaflet, there was a TV on that front page.
Yeah.
Who is setting that price on that?
Exactly.
Is it the stores who want to drive trade for the stores, or is it actually the e-commerce? Because we had an extra cost of logistics on top. And then it was suddenly not profitable to sell at that price.
Yeah, and this is in the middle of the situation where, the physical leaflets, they were sort of starting to fade away, and they were still strong and still the king.
They are still king.
And they still are, but you also needed to put new stuff in the ingredients. But if you really called it out on a sort of a business contribution level, the digital part was still inferior and could be treated as that.
Yes.
For a long time.
Yes, and it was then it was not this guy's PLL, so he didn't care. So let's just throw in a cheap TV on the front page, and so there were so many things where it was not the technical stuff.
No,
it was the change management of legacy processes and legacy setup, saying, "Oh, we don't have a shared P&L. You have something for e-commerce, you have something for the physical business."
Yeah.
Good luck finding out who's responsible for that price.
Yeah.
One is losing money, the other one is getting some revenue in.
Yeah.
Who's to win? And so there was so many. I will not call them battles. Many things that you needed to actually do differently when you look at the digital business on the side. And if you wanted to grow that business, then what should we do about the old processes?
Yeah.
And like I say, and I really, that's one of the key learnings that I take away from the Selling Group, is that new technology with old processes is just a waste of money.
Yeah.
Because you are just killing yourself. And building a new business like a digital business with the old processes, that will at some point create a big conflict inside the organization. So you need to have those balances right when you start to build a business, a digital business that you would like to grow significantly.
Yeah, I guess that's also a learning that we've talked a lot about in general, that we've seen way too many situations where new technology is installed.
Yeah.
And you barely just sort of replaced something with something a little better, but you didn't really get anything new out of it.
No.
And if that was, it should have been the analysis from the get-go.
Yeah.
And if that is the analysis, then rather, even though you could seem like a very sort of old-fashioned guy, then rather postpone doing new technology until you found out why you should do that investment. Because it's know you can sound like an old man, but I would actually say at times some of the IT investment that I postponed has probably been some of my wisest decisions during my career.
And I would actually agree to that, and I would say the same for me. And which is quite odd because I've been living off building new stuff and a lot, but those were the best investments. Yeah. And you can see it from time to time again. And the real problem, as I see it nowadays, is that the IT investments is getting bigger and bigger and bigger because there's a huge complexity that they need to be able to cater for. Yeah. But if you're building a new e-commerce business nowadays, let's say you get 1, 2, 3, 5% on the bottom line, you're actually a good business. Yeah. But you need a really, really good long business case horizon in order to cater for, okay, I can only deliver 5%. So if I'm investing 10, 20 million in a new IT setup, you better get a lot of revenue in order to get that in because your bottom line is really, really small. But we see business cases growing, and then the bets are getting bigger and bigger as well. Yeah. And that's where a lot of people fail in that, but we will probably get into that.
But then at the one last bit from this coming in as the one representing the digital sort of infrastructure, or at least the customer-facing infrastructure part of it, and then leading to a lot of back-end stuff as well. An advice for a new Toke going into a business, strong business, well-earning business, needing to be the guy that comes with digital as one of your tools to install growth. Mm. What did you do well, and what, to reflect a little bit upon yourself, what could you probably have done better if you were to do it again?
I would do one thing really different. Yeah. Small successes. Yeah. I will take them any day of the week. Yeah. I was continuously, despite that there were so many things that I wanted to change, but I've quickly found the root cause of everything. It was that big SAP Hybris in the middle, right? And we had a lot of problems with that monolith. But actually, the more small successes I could install before going for the big one, I would do that. It was the root cause. Yeah. But I was struggling with that, and that business case become bigger and bigger and bigger in order to actually take that out. Yeah. So I would much rather have taken some of the small successes, taken complexity away, so the business case that I should do to actually solve the root cause was not as big. Yeah. That would have made everything way more simple and way more easier to succeed.
Yeah. So one big advice there. Even though sometimes people think, it needs to be big and bold and ambitious and etc., but you're actually building a barrier for yourself to succeed.
Exactly.
Often, unless there is some other very good reasons for going that way, of course.
And bright people, they have big ambitions. Yeah. I want to do this, and I want to make this, and everybody wants to be a success. Yeah. I want to be a success. Still not, right? But if you want to be a success, you build big business cases. Yeah. But then you are putting big bets on the table as well. Yeah, maybe not for you as a person, because you're probably on to your next job in 2 years' time and so on, but for the company that is there, because they need to survive the legacy that you're putting into that. Yeah. And if you're putting a big bet on it, then you're probably making some really bad decisions. Yeah. So I would go the other way around if I were back. Simple down, small successes, show the growth, and then just add on when you have. So I really like the quote. I think as a French philosopher who says it's not the ultimate perfection is not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. Yeah. And I really like that quote.
That's a great quote to end. And I would say, as a replication of what you say in other organizations in general, we've both been working a lot on the e-commerce agenda and e-commerce driving growth, either as a pure play company or for a brand or whatever it be. And I think at times we've been sitting saying, we know that there was sold a big business case in on doing a new web shop or whatever. And then we constantly said, what if just, let's say, a minority of these companies had just bought a Shopify at that moment, which is equal to what you're saying, reduce the business case, complexity at the same time. Yes, you pay a fee ongoing on your transactions, but there's a lot of stuff that you've taken off your shoulders, and you've put yourself in such a much better position to go from there.
But everybody wants to be special, right? Yeah. So how do you fit into a standard setup, a standard system, and a standard go-to-market approach? Everybody wants to be special. But if you take that feeling out of yourself and out of the business and say, I'm pretty standard.
I really love that quote, because you said it, I think 14 days or 3 weeks ago where we met, where you said, the moment as a company, particularly both in business and in IT, that you realize that you are pretty standard as a company, despite having the greatest product in the world, then you come to a much higher degree of clarity in terms of making decisions moving forward.
Yes, it really speed up the way that you can accelerate your growth. By one simple realization is that I'm not that special. Maybe you're special in one corner or another corner. Keep doing that.
Yeah.
But the rest, standard. Your sales process is standard. Yeah. The way that you are talking to clients, standard, and so on. Maybe it's something particular. Keep that. Continue working on that. But realize the 90% of the rest of the business, standard.
And growth actually would come from someone recognizing that it's standard and that it's not a bad thing at all. It's actually...
Then scalability kicks in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And then you came from selling to consultancy again, a note of consultancy.
Honestly, I needed to lick the wound a little bit after being in a large corporate. And I chose a small, really good player that had some really bright guys.
Yeah.
And they were doing some early stuff of what's nowadays in the tech world called composable.
Yeah.
And I have felt that idea on my own body, so I love that idea. So I worked with them for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then during Corona, we were sitting and saying we need to do something.
Yeah.
And every day in my life I have been wanting to do a startup, trying to do something that scales, but also trying to be the leader I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And was not supposed to be. In the Lego group, you're supposed to be one kind of leader. In the selling group, you are supposed to be another kind of leader.
Yeah.
And suddenly, when you have your own company, you can actually choose the leader you want to be.
Yeah.
That was the primary drivers of building my own company. Is I wanted to see something scale with an idea that I have been working on, and I wanted to be the leader I wanted to be.
And then getting a company off the ground. Another component of growth that we can sometimes sit and say growth is tough and these big organizations are pretty good at it, but couldn't they be a little better? And then you are suddenly with something that is not in the market, that you need to create a demand for it. You need to explain people why this is sort of, we're really sort of at the early stages of talking about growth at all. You need to make sure that there is actually a demand for this product. How has that been and what has that sort of,
I've learned so many things.
Yeah.
And I have deep respect for some of the processes that is going on in large enterprises. And I hope that a lot of people sitting inside large corporates and think, oh, we're so slow, we're so everything. But they're there for a reason, right? And you need to understand that. Something needs to be challenged, some things needs to be taken away. But also you need to cherish some of the safety nets.
Yeah, and the structure that you can allow yourself to have as a big company and make sure that your growth is continuous, that nothing just falls between any chairs or anything.
But feeling the pain of nobody calls you. Yeah. Because I thought when I was in the Lego group, I was called by headhunters and by management consultants on a daily basis. And same when I went to the selling group.
Yeah.
But suddenly... there was nobody calling.
And then it gets to be a little bit, growth reversed because you raise a set amount of money.
Yeah.
It gives you leeway to go for X amount of months with a set team.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of you eat into that. You could say, is there growth? Yeah, there needs to be new clients, but they need to meet a threshold for you to get someone to come with the next round.
Yeah, and that's a completely different game of growth because you can see corporate growth.
Yeah.
You actually from a conceptual and from what you learn in universities and so on, there's corporate growth.
Yeah.
You need to add this, you need to do X, Y, Z.
We can do adjacent stuff and we can expand penetrate a market or a product category better, etc. Yeah.
But the venture game is a completely different game.
Yeah.
Despite that it have some of the same components, but the way you get funding, the way you get investments is actually your ability to burn.
Yeah.
And get the revenue based on that burn, showing the scalability, and then you get a new funding round.
Yeah.
But if you are in tough markets like the past 3 years, then the funding dries out pretty fast. And then you are in other problems, right? And I've been dealing with those problems as well. Yeah. But it is a completely different game. And honestly, I needed 3 years to really, truly understand the VC game and understand how it works.
Yeah. And one thing is sort of then being, I guess now we have some of the learning of you sitting as a CEO and a founder, and I know you continuously drive, you've created a really great product. Maybe a little bit about, again, touching upon the IT technology side as well, because you have the the privilege of coming into those conversations, knowing both the business side and the IT side of what is going on in organization nowadays and how do you bridge those. You said new technology with old processes, that won't work. But what is what do these companies come to you? I mean, one thing is what your product solves.
Yeah.
But what are their pains actually right now, and what is that you sort of see again and again that blocks them in some kind of way? Now talking 2024 and
2024, we still talk legacy, right?
Yeah.
That's if you look at it from the very, very ground rules, is that a lot of companies are still stuck with some decisions they took 8-10 years back, and they might be on SAP ECC, which is the ERP system of the company. But then now SAP says in 2 years' time, we're going to close that down. It's going to go end of life.
Yeah.
So a lot of companies on SAP, they are stuck and sitting and saying, ooh, I need 30 months and a big business case of changing my ERP system. And others are saying, oh, I have had Sitecore for the last 10 years. I need to change the CMS now because now that goes end of life. So we do see a lot of companies struggling with legacy, and they need to do something. So that's one side of what I see, is that we need to move away from something that we have been on the last 10 years, and we are forced into it.
And find our way out of that, and what is how is the right way to go about that? Probably taking up a lot of time in corporate nowadays.
And a lot of people are sitting and saying, oh, I need to change from SAP ECC to SAP S4 for HANA. Yeah. Oh, I need to remember that old saying, new systems with old processes is bad. So there will be a lot of companies out there, majority enterprises, that will for the next 2 years focus on one thing.
Yeah.
A new ERP system. So that's one side. Then the other side of the coin is the AI. Everybody is looking and say, oh, we want to dip our toes into AI and so on. But a lot of people a lot of companies don't have the infrastructure to actually work on AI, and they are afraid to putting it into their infrastructure. So that's another thing that I see quite a lot, is saying we want to work more with that, but getting it in, it's tough business. Yeah. As one thing. And then the other side of the coin says, oh, in 2 years' time, developers will be twice as fast.
Yeah.
I already see now studies from Tata Consultancy Service, and even Google says that it's approximately 20 to 30% of the code is now done by AI.
Yeah.
In 2 years' time, it's expected to be twice as high.
Yeah, that's one of the promises of AI that we can't just get used to, because that will probably more or less-ish be true.
Yeah,
I completely buy into that. There's a lot of stuff that I don't buy into, but that one makes sense.
It might be crap today. It might hallucinate today. It might be a lot of things. But in 2 years' time, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
But then you are faced with another decision, which is quite interesting. If you have a business today and you are looking at a business case saying, let's say, 10,000 hours of development work to actually get where you want to go, in 2 years' time, that will be half.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you then wait 2 years,
Yeah.
surviving the next 2 years, because there's a lot of uncertainty now, Mr. Trump is president and so on. So there's so much uncertainty.
Yeah.
Should I take that business case? Or should I just wait 2 years, waiting for developers to be much better?
And if we wait, what could we then do to outmaneuver our competition? In meanwhile, if they choose the other path of saying we go deep into this very heavy stuff that will more or less paralyze us for 1 or 2 years,
yes.
What can you then bring at sort of advantage in the market in that period of time? It's not as easy as it has been.
Growth in the coming years will be extremely tough, and you need to find ways of simplifying your business. So you can, and now it's almost full circle, right?
Yeah.
But it's going back to your responsiveness to change. It's not the strongest of the species, nor the most intelligent, but those that are most responsive to change.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a really tough one for most e-commercers here in Denmark, but also a lot of B2B clients.
Exactly.
And so on.
I think it goes actually as a general learning across.
They will all feel it, and it's about how do you then create that responsiveness, because you will find segments, you will find niches where you can actually survive. But on the larger scale, with the marketplaces, with the Chinese coming in and so on, unless we are building walls around Europe, there will be something where we need to be able to adapt to a different reality.
Yeah. Really so maybe we actually, as you say, coming full circle on our conversation today, because the initial question and theme of these talks, no matter who we bring in, you today having worked at the sort of intersection of these disciplines, is where will growth come from? And responsiveness to change, simplicity is some keywords that I take out of your your experiences, but also sort of the conversation that you have right now that we need all of us to make sure that we address, because working just at the surface of things will not get us there, right?
No. You need to be deep into details on about what is your stock, what is your prices, what is the competitor prices, what is a lot of things you need to take into account in order to actually stay profitable in your digital business.
Yeah.
Also going forward. And unfortunately for me, sometimes the answer is not new tech, more tech. It's actually less tech.
Yeah.
More simplicity.
Yeah. How do you drive that commercial engine in an efficient way? And that's a ton of components in that. I've been heavily invested and, spending a lot of my time working with digital tools. I'm equally fascinated at it, but I must admit that I see a lot of the stuff where the digital solution or the tool comes earlier than the problem, which is a major issue. Also, we have the talks of AI. I'm absolutely sure this will be a game changer.
Yes.
No doubt about that. But I do also at times have a bad feeling in my stomach in terms of people talking and spending time on that compared to the things that we have been talking about just here in the end of this podcast on things that actually move the needle. Because if you spend 80% of your time in something that you could either wait or should just be a fast follower to observe and dig into when it materializes, and 20% on your root problem, that is, how do I get the customers? How do I convert them particularly? And how much can I sell to them to get my basic business equation in place? We can end in tough situations, I would say.
It's actually quite interesting the way you say it. I really like the quote later today on LinkedIn on it's the wisdom to how to apply the tools that is crucial in the future.
Yeah.
But it's the wisdom that understands the core problem and then understands I need this tool. And all the tech out there is just tools.
Yeah.
And you need to understand the core problem before you start working with the tools. That is what a true business acumen is, what they're doing, understanding the core of the problem.
That's strong words. Yes. I think we should end it there because this is full circle.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time talking here, but it's also been extremely rewarding. And I think we actually covered a lot of stuff that we intended to.
Hopefully some others can learn from my learnings.
I'm sure they can. And thank you very much for
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Toke.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or requests, you can always contact us at info@kvadrant.dk. If you want to know even more about Kvadrant Consulting, please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to our newsletter, or go to our website kvadrant.dk.